Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this work session of the Washington County Board of Education. We do have all elected members present this afternoon, so we do have a quorum. However, there will be no voting taking place this afternoon, as this is a work session, and we will be receiving information and discussing information. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. David Savine, our superintendent, and turn things over to him. Dr. Savine.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Williams, board members. I'd like to begin my comments by extending my thanks to all of our teachers in Washington County Public Schools. Teacher Appreciation Week provides a time to celebrate our outstanding educators for the positive difference they make each and every day. To all of our teachers, I would like to say thank you for being an inspiration to your students, your peers, and families. Thank you for being innovative in your approaches to education, and thank you for believing in the potential of every child. Your hard work does not go unnoticed, and we're proud to have you in Washington County Public Schools. Your impact extends far beyond the classroom, and for that, we are immensely grateful. Tomorrow is National School Nurses Day. It's important to celebrate the critical work that our school health staff undertakes to keep students healthy and ready to learn. Joining us now are Amy Edwards, a supervisor of school health, and Dan McCarl, who oversees the Meritus Health School Nurse Program, to share more about the work of their team members.
Thank you so much for having us today. So since 1991, health coverage by a school health professional has been mandated in Maryland. And in Washington County, we have a total of approximately 22 registered nurses, 10 licensed practical nurses, and 33 certified medication technicians that are also certified nursing assistants. And they provide the health services to all of our students. And in addition to that, WCPS employs 2 registered nurses, 9 licensed practical nurses, and 1 certified medication technician. And we also train 2 health paraprofessionals to provide continuous, more individualized nursing services to students with higher acuity health needs. So to paint a little picture of the work that we do, this school year so far, school health staff, we saw 88,161 health room visits for acute injuries and acute illnesses. And in addition to that, there was 68,237 visits for medication and treatment administrations. That totals 156,398 health room visits so far this year.
So school nurses bridge healthcare and education to ensure that students are present, they're safe, and they're ready to learn. They ensure that students have equal access to their education, and they play a critical role in addressing health inequities that affect the community. School nurses promote health and wellness practices to improve health outcomes for the students and the families of Washington County. So on National School Nurse Day and throughout the year, we celebrate the accomplishments of school nurses and express our gratitude for providing quality care and services to our community.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Mrs. Edwards, Mr. McCarl, we thank you for that update, and we extend our appreciation to all of our healthcare professionals that keep our students healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Finally, I'd like to share some positive news from our Food and Nutrition Services Department from this past Friday on School Lunch Hero Day. Staff presented the first ever School Nutrition Hero Award. The well-deserved recipient was Miss Carol Berry. Just over a year ago, you may recall, she was delivering school meals to Pleasant Valley Elementary when she was involved in a very serious car accident. Even while she was being airlifted to a trauma center, she expressed her concern about students getting the meals she was in the process of delivering. She was fully committed to making a full recovery and returning to the cafeteria at Pleasant Valley. We're glad to say she is back and serving our students there at Pleasant Valley Elementary. The Putting Students First Award was also presented to Megan Clipp, who stood in for Mrs. Berry after the accident and saw that students continued to receive high-quality meals. We're very proud of both of these outstanding employees. So, President Williams, that concludes my update and report to begin our work session.
Thank you, Dr. Savine. Colleagues, we have 3 topics for discussion this afternoon. The first being the 2024 Washington County Public Schools Blueprint Plan. The second being the Strategic Plan Update, Mapping Our Future. And we will wrap up the third, which is the Board of Education's fiscal year 2025 General Fund Operating Budget. So we will begin with Dr. Jennifer Webster, our Associate Superintendent for Administration and Leadership, and Dr. Gary Willow, our Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Savine. I think we'll start by just making sure that board members and those that are listening have an understanding of what they're looking at, whether they're online or what's in front of you with the blueprint plan itself. So the blueprint plan this year is a little different than what we've experienced in the past. There's actually several parts to it that make up one document. So here in the first part, when you actually open up your document, you're going to see that there's a small section labeled Section 1, and then the actual plan itself that was due on May 1st, that is more of all of the questions, and you can see the specific questions and then the answers and the responses. Dr. Webster and I do want to thank, and on behalf of Dr. Savine as well, on the inside cover you can see who was part of the WCPS Blueprint Committee. We did have principals, teachers that assisted with this, and the numerous departments who worked on our blueprint plan, including human resources, special education, the finance team, student services, and the entire division of curriculum. What I guess we're both trying to say here clearly is that there are a lot of departments, a lot of individuals that have helped create this plan. So with that, Part 1 was originally submitted on March 15th and approved on April 26th. Part 2, which again includes all of those questions, we submitted on May 1st, and we expect that there'll be revisions and additional feedback that will go into a final plan before it's approved. Also new this year is the WCPS Literacy Plan, which is also on our website and follows right behind in the blueprint document itself. The elementary draft for our literacy plan was submitted back in January. This is a plan that has been reviewed at CNI before, but we'll continue to update the Curriculum and Instruction Committee. The second part of the secondary draft was submitted for feedback on May 2nd with the goal of having both elementary and secondary approved by June 28th. So again, last year, one plan. This year, one plan, but several parts to it. And I think that's important for those that might be viewing this online. So what we're going to do today is give an overview of the different pillars. I don't know that a lot has changed in terms of where we're at from Blueprint last year, but I think there's more updates that we can share with how we're doing in certain areas within the pillars. So the highlights for Pillar 1 in early learning. We know that our students are better prepared for kindergarten. I don't think anyone's going to forget Ms. Longerbeam's presentation from a couple weeks ago. We know where we currently stand, that our universal pre-K program is better preparing our students for kindergartens. And it's a good reminder that we do have pre-K classrooms in every elementary school and currently 2 high schools, North Hagerstown High School and Boyd J. Michael Technical School. And then we do have partnerships with the community. Currently, we have over 70 students that are being served with pre-K in our community. So what are our next steps? To continue to explore partnerships to expand 3-year-old pre-K. One of the challenges that is outlined in the plan, you all as board members understand that our September 30th enrollment funds the following school year. Now, anyone that's had a child in a daycare setting knows that you typically pay every week, every other week, maybe you're set up to pay monthly. So one of the challenges that we continue to face that we're working with the state on is how does a daycare take their September 30th enrollment and not receive funding until the following year? Like, that's very hard for any business to possibly sustain. Now, there are expansion grants, which is helpful. That's how we expanded our pre-K, and that does ease with some of those challenges. But it's just a different structure between how a school system operates on funding versus our private daycare. And that's going to be something that's bigger than just our county. It's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to work with as we expand in the 3-year-old with the funding partners at the state level so that we have more private providers that are able to come on board. And then the other piece that we want to continue is to support our pre-K paraprofessionals in obtaining their CDA, which is a requirement, and or an associate degree. And we do have some cohorts that we've highlighted in the plan. We've taken advantage of our staff that are able to run after school professional learning and helping our paraprofessionals earn their CDA. And we do have some that are working toward an associate's degree, but that's something we obviously want to continue.
Great. And now we're going to take a look at Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, with some of the highlights in our work in the last year. First, one of the highlights, of course, is our starting salary for teachers. We've also made strides in secondary planning time to increase the amount of planning time for our secondary teachers, which is one of the Blueprint priorities. We've also increased our number of nationally board certified teachers from 30 to 79, so that's a nice increase in the last year. And our Reading Tutor Apprenticeship and Maryland Accelerates program also provide that early contact to career for our young adults and our current students. Where our growth is, our next steps, our current work in Pillar 2 is really tackling the elementary planning time and what our approach will be to increasing planning for elementary staff. We have an amazing partnership that has really grown between our communications team and our human resources team, and even expanding cross-office, including our curriculum team leaders, our leaders in operations, to really think about how we enhance our marketing and recruitment strategies as a district. And then also we need to work on the development of the required career ladder.
As a reminder, Pillar 3 is around college and career readiness. Our highlights include the math and English language arts curriculum and supports. I know that in previous work sessions, we highlighted the Tier 1, Tier 2 resources that we have that are HQIM. We've also highlighted the work that has been completed around the science of reading and some of the early math interventions that we're running to improve proficiency levels in both English language arts and mathematics. The early college program is another highlight with Hagerstown Community College for both the dual credit opportunities that we offer in our high schools, but also the number of students that take advantage of opportunities by going to the Hagerstown Community College campus and taking courses out there, or we also have some students that are online. The third pathway, CTE programs that we talk about, again, remember there are 3 early college programs, dual credit, AP programs, and then, of course, the expansion of the CTE programs, which is that third pathway. As a reminder, we are starting the HVAC program at North Hagerstown High School. We have the aviation program that had expanded at Williamsport High School. That's over a year now, but those are 2 of our newer programs. And then, of course, the CNA GNA program as well. Our next steps include enhancing supplemental instruction, which is what we've talked about, that Tier 2 supports in the classroom setting, and then continue to refine the MTSS plans to identify learning gaps to really help our students that have gaps in both literacy and or mathematics that need additional supports.
And Pillar 4, more resources for students to be successful. Some of the highlights in our work have been our high exit rate for our multilingual learner students, our expansion of mental health, behavior supports, supports for students with disabilities, and our multilingual learners, and the expansion of community schools. We've gone from 8 in 22-23 to 12 this year, and next year we will have, is it up to 18? It's 18, this just in. It was 17 a few days ago. We're up to 18 for 24-25, and all of the community engagement and wraparound service support that comes with having a school be designated a community school, which is very exciting for our communities. Our next steps in Pillar 4 focus around continuing, as Dr. Willow just mentioned, building staff capacity around the utilization of the MTSS tool. We also are focused on developing our and supporting our new community schools and their programming to match the needs of students and their families. And lastly, continuing to monitor and build programs for our increasing number of multilingual learners in our schools.
And the last pillar is governance, Pillar 5, governance and accountability. And what might not seem like a highlight to someone that's not familiar with Blueprint and the funding following the student, I think this is a tremendous shout out to our finance team and all of our administrative assistants that help keep track of the account codes. Within the last year alone, we've added at least 50,000 account codes. 50,000 account codes, so that every purchase that we're making is able to be tracked back to the school level or the student following the student. So this has had a big change on how we order. And I know that the finance team has really taken the lead on that. And that is a highlight for us that we were able to get to that point. And then I know that Dr. Webster and Dr. Savine are going to talk a little bit more about the strategic plan in our next presentation. But a highlight of this is, as Dr. Savine has shared before, the Blueprint plan is the cornerstone of our strategic plan. And then our next steps are to continue to refine the funding and tracking so that we're further aligning our spending with the different pillars of the Blueprint. And I think with that, President Williams, I'll turn it back to you for if there are any questions.
Thank you both. Colleagues, questions?
I have a question. Since you have 50,000, what did you call them?
Count codes.
Account codes. Does that mean every student has an account code?
You might think it would be easier if we had every student with a count code, but the challenge is when you're tracking this, you're tracking it in a number of ways, from instructional materials to equipment to supplies to professional learning. And if you think about all of those categories that are in your budget book, and then creating a code that allows it to follow back to the school, that's where it very quickly multiplies. And so, to your point, it may be easier, but unfortunately with all the different categories on how we track funding, it makes it, can't even get it to that level where it's just a code per student.
Okay.
So, looking at Pillar 2, with the high quality and diverse workforce, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is the Blueprint is estimated to require 15,000 new teachers by the time it's fully implemented. How can we ensure that we're getting high quality teachers? I mean, when you have to hire that many new teachers in one state, let alone the surrounding areas we have, how can you ensure that we're going to have high quality staff, and what kind of plan do we have once it gets to that level?
You want me to?
I was going to say, I immediately think of Ms. Burkhart and her team, so if you want to speak to their success this year.
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to actually do is start maybe one step before that. I think it starts with the Grow Your Own programs that we're currently creating, whether it be our Reading Tutor apprentices, whether it be the Maryland Accelerates program. I think it actually to be honest, the teacher shortage, I think, goes all the way back to middle school. It's getting students excited about the possibility of being a teacher and the benefits to that, right? And so we know that from the research we've presented here before, that those that decide to go into teaching are making that decision sometime between 9th and 12th grade, right? The majority of them. Not all, but the majority. So how do we take advantage of that to better make sure that our students understand that there are wonderful things about being a teacher? So I think it starts there, right? And then it's partnering with our colleges and universities and the work that we do so that when our teachers do come out of the college and university, they're ready to step into a classroom. And then to what Dr. Webster shared, it's the support that we provide throughout the year. And really, it's ongoing. It's not just 1 year, but if you think of our teacher induction program, the work that Ms. Burkhart, this board has invested in additional mentor positions that support. And of course, you have the lead teacher and administrators. So I think it's having a good program there as well, Mr. Evans. And I think if you have those three things in place, that's how you tackle whatever additional needs you need with for teachers.
Any other questions? I'm just reminded that not only in those first few years of a teacher's career do they receive exceptional professional development. I'm reminded of my experience over my 35 years of the exceptional professional development that I was provided, not just in those first 3 years, but throughout my teaching career. I think Washington County does a fine job of just exemplary professional development. Dr. Zettenmeyer, I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but I know that I grew in many content areas as well as in the profession. So I'm very, very grateful for all that I received by way of professional development. So Mr. Evans, they may not come in high quality, but through the course of what happens through the efforts of many here at CES, they develop and become high quality.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Dr. Webster is going to stay there because our next topic is the strategic plan update, mapping our future. And Dr. Webster, we'll let you get started with that.
All right, well, thank you. I look forward to updating the board and the community on the initiation of our strategic plan work. As you know, the work is important as we engage a range of stakeholders in assessing our current state as a district, and that we ground ourselves in our vision and mission and core values, and that we isolate from there, we isolate those key buckets of work that we have ahead of us as a district to realize that vision for our school system. And as Dr. Willow just noted, there are a lot of initiatives that we have to keep in mind as we're charting our future, thinking about the requirements of Blueprint and and the changing demands on our current students as they emerge out of school and into college and career. So our strategic planning process began at the beginning of April with focus groups of staff, community members, and students. And you see images here of some of the focus groups conducted by our strategic planning facilitators from HMH. The facilitators asked our students, staff, and community members questions like, tell me about teaching and learning here in WCPS. Tell me about how decisions are made. What do you think leaders care about most, and how do you know? And from these interviews, the facilitators are summarizing the themes from the feedback from our students, staff, and community. We also held a community forum on April 18th at South Hagerstown High School, and you see images here from that evening. We had a wonderful turnout of staff, parents, and even a few students joined us. And during our time together, the participants gave us feedback on the for the priorities of strategic planning entry points that they're called, or basically where you can start with strategic planning for our work. And under each of these 6 entry points, participants gave us feedback on what they value. Those entry points are teaching and learning, values, culture, resource allocation, decision-making, and talent management. To ensure we solicited input from a broader audience than the members of our community who were able to join us to attend the forum or attend one of our feedback sessions, we sent out a survey that mirrored the questions from that community forum. And from this survey, we have over 400 responses, with a third of them coming from our students, 40% coming from our parent guardians, and around 30% from our staff. All of these inputs are being summarized for themes to inform our strategic planning priorities, which we will be working on developing in the coming weeks. Now, to provide you with a preview of the themes that are emerging from the feedback for each of those entry points, we can view the themes here. You'll see that for teaching and learning, there is interest in exploring access and opportunity, relationships, and student well-being, as well as our facilities. For resource allocation, there's interest in topics surrounding overall funding for the district and our improvements to our facilities. And for decision-making, there's interest in authentic engagement of our stakeholders. For culture, entry point, there's interest in engagement of our school communities and enhanced communication. For talent management, there's interest in differentiated professional learning and increasing our competitiveness for teacher and staff salaries. And for values, there's interest in early engagement of our learners, critical thinking, and safety and security. Our strategic plan design team kicked off its meeting. Our strategic plan design team consists of about 50 members, 11 of whom make up the steering committee who are leading the planning of this work. We're very appreciative of our design team members who spent the better part of their afternoon on May 1st and May 2nd with us. And in that meeting of design team members, we had students, staff, parents, and business partners who I can say fully engaged in helping us to begin to refine our district vision, mission, and develop the competencies that make up a portrait of a graduate. This is foundational work that we must do before we start to isolate our strategic planning priorities. As a follow-up to the initial design team meetings, the steering committee, which consists of our senior leadership team members, 2 principals, and Ms. Burkhart, will take the work done by the design team and be prepared to come back to them on May 15th with revised core values, vision and mission statements, as well as a portrait of a graduate competencies. And I look forward to sharing those products with you at our June 4th board update, along with the next steps that we take with the strategic planning team on May 15th and May 16th. And at this time, I am open for questions and discussion.
Colleagues, questions?
Yeah, I have just a couple quick questions. So I think you said that survey was sent to 400 people?
We sent the survey to the entire community, and we got 400 responses.
400, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. It was interesting. The breakdown was equally pretty much distributed between students, staff, and families between the respondents. It was kind of interesting.
How was that sent out? Was it electronic? Was it?
Yes, it was all electronic administration for the survey.
Dr. Webster, could you give us the percentage breakdown again? I wanted to write it down and I did not.
Absolutely. Find that sheet. There were, it's a little over 400 responses. 1/3 of them came from students. I hope my math adds up. 40% from parents and guardians, and about 30% from staff members.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Stauffer?
If the blueprint plan, reading from one of the other documents, is the cornerstone of the WCPS strategic plan, just so the public knows, what will be the differences?
Great question. So the blueprint requirements are mandated requirements that we make to the way we work. They set goals for us and requirements for, some of the things in blueprint are very specific mandates that must be met. Our strategic plan is basically our overall plan of how we realize our vision. So the blueprint may list things that must be done, but it doesn't give you an overall prioritization and vision for the way you're going to execute to get there. Blueprint paints a picture for us of our future in education and elevates certain priorities. But to really say in Washington County, this is where we are as a community and how we plan to move forward to achieve not just the goals laid out in Blueprint, but what our students need to be successful after they leave us. The strategic plan is a broader approach to that.
I just have one question. How was our special needs schools represented in this program? Did we send something to parents, and did we get any responses back from our special needs student, parents, guardians?
We included all families and in the survey, so they would have been included in that way. We also, when we conducted our student focus groups, we sent the facilitators out to schools to conduct those groups with students in their home school to eliminate barriers for transportation. That's just for all students to access a central location. We sent folks out and we ensured that those focus groups consisted of a diverse range of students so that we're representative of students who receive services for English language learning, for special education, students who are in magnet programs, students who are in grade level classes, so that we would get a range of experience. We also, when we conducted our focus groups, we specifically invited parents of students with special needs, to your question, to ensure that we had their voice included in the conversation.
Do you know if we had anybody represent from that Marshall Street program?
I know we had a parent for sure who participated from at least one off the top of my head. That's what I can say with confidence.
Dr. Webster, could you share a little bit about the student focus group who was involved there?
Yeah, so we selected elementary, middle, and high schools for our facilitators to visit. And we asked that the principals put together a group of 10 to 12 students in each of the schools to engage in a 45-minute discussion. And the facilitators took the students through those the questions like the ones that I just shared in the beginning. And they took literal notes of what the students were saying. And part of the way that the themes are elicited from in the summary report for us is they took those comments, and the facilitators are coding those and putting them underneath the themes that we saw back on this slide here, so that those themes that are listed would have quotes from our students or our staff in the focus groups that support why they selected those as themes. So when we eventually produce our final product, you'll see the student, staff, and community voice in isolating those themes. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Webster.
Thank you.
Okay, our next topic for discussion is our fiscal year 2025 general fund operating budget. We have Dr. Savine, Mr. Prue, our Chief Operating Officer, and Mr. Sisler, our Executive Director of Finance, at the table with us.
Thank you, President Williams. I want to extend my appreciation to our entire finance team. Since the last time we met, we have had a work session of the board to address items of interest of the board. And then late Friday, we received the calc tool from the state, and our team worked through the weekend to provide some additional updates that you will hear here shortly in this work session segment. I'll turn it over to Mr. Prue at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Savine, and good afternoon, board members. Prior to the start of the work session, we placed a document at each of your seats to give you a little bit of a summary of what's really going on, what happened with state financing, and where we are to date, with a recommendation of how this board could balance the budget to where we are currently. I think to open, one of the things that occurred, I think we shared this at the last work session, one of the things that occurred during the General Assembly session is a decision was made to alter the blueprint law for FY25, eliminating the funding for Tier 2 students and to utilize that money for pre-K expansion grants. So to reinforce what Dr. Willow said, you know, one of the challenges for the growth of pre-K programs is funding a classroom with materials and with teacher salaries and aide salaries and so forth and various other infrastructures, and then waiting till the next fiscal year to get paid for that class. And that's what's going on with the pre-K expansion, as it does with, you know, with any year that we have funding. But as a school system that's, of course, been active for a long time, we're beyond that point. Washington County was lucky to build pre-K programs a little at a time with available funding we had, and so we're a little more advanced than our peers around the state. But folks need support. Both private providers and public schools need additional support in building those programs, and so the funding that was set aside for Tier 2 students in FY25 was allocated into expansion grants as opposed to supporting Tier 2 students that were already seated around the state. We were much more advanced. I believe the number is roughly $7.5 million was reallocated from an adjustment of that bill, and we were approximately, as we think about just WCPS's students, about about 20% of that reduction came through Washington County Public Schools. So at the end of the day, as we look at the document, in terms of what we are reduced $958,000 in our pre-K revenue for students that actually were in pre-K in WCPS as we think about our funding for next year. I'm going to bounce around this page a little bit. So that number is at the top of your page, but I want to draw your attention to the line towards the bottom that is section 2C4, which is the transfer for private pre-K providers. There were 53 students, Tier 1 students, in private pre-K settings over the course of this school year, and we are the pass-through entity for them. So when we think about what our overall pre-K revenue is, that revenue comes through WCPS, and it's being handled ultimately a different way, but it's on our books and then gets paid as an expense on our books as it goes out to the private pre-K providers. So those two numbers in connection add up to slightly more than $1.4 million. That's the deficit we have to fix at this point. So reduction in revenue for our own students, and then the pass-through entity of the money, the $517,000 that needs to go out to other entities. What I'll talk to you about now is how do we plan, you know, what is staff's recommendation for the board on how we get there. Looking again back towards the top of your document, we would recommend an adjustment to interest income. So this is a revenue adjustment, an upward revenue adjustment. We are currently with the nature of interest income at the current level and interest rates, and really not seeing much movement or indication to movement. We believe we are safe in recommending to the board an increase of almost $250,000 in our interest income for FY25. That's still less than the interest we've received in the current year, and feel that still gives us a cushion if interest rates should reduce. Additionally, seeing the reduction in revenue is predominantly out of pre-K. There are several pre-K positions that were recommended to this board and that you awarded or approved in your draft budget that were new positions for FY25. We are recommending that, seeing we don't have the new revenue, that we reduce those positions or eliminate those planned positions. And I want to be very clear, these are not positions that are in our schools today. These were planned additions to the budget for FY25 to continue to meet the 85% or the 75% rule we have under the blueprint. So that is 5 pre-K teachers, 4 pre-K reading math tutor paraprofessionals, and 1 pre-K BCBA. If you're cross-referencing to the full complete budget, there were 6 new pre-K teachers added. One of those teachers is currently teaching at Ruth M. Monroe under a grant that is ending. That was a 1-year grant. We knew it was a 1-year grant, but anticipated new funding. We would propose that we keep that position. And it also helps Ruth M. Monroe Primary keep up with the 75% rule in terms of meeting the goals of the blueprint. And then the last adjustment, of course, we also would then have an adjustment for benefits, FICA, workers' comp, insurance benefits, and so forth for all of those positions. And then the last adjustment is the last line towards the bottom, which is a $500,000 adjustment to our student health services line. I want to be clear about this one as well. We are not reducing student health services. I want to be clear about that, especially as we celebrated School Nurses Week, or Nurses Week in general, just a few moments ago. Because of our growth of our concentration of poverty programs and the requirement to provide a school nurse, a registered nurse in every school, that money is being, the money for those salaries is being paid out of our concentration of poverty grants, which allows us to take this reduction in the general fund. So we're not changing any level of services. We're not changing any level of staffing in a downward nature as a result of this change. It's really a shift of funding source from the general fund to the concentration of poverty grants. And if the board is willing to accept those, you will have a balanced budget that you could approve this evening in the special meeting. But staff's happy to answer any questions you have or entertain any other options.
Questions, colleagues?
So I'll just say that, we've had a couple presentations showing how we're low on our fund balance for what the policy says. And it concerns me that we're going to use money from interest revenue to pay for this. So I'm personally not for that. I think we need to, I know it's not easy given a tight budget, but I think we need to find other cuts because we have a policy that we need to adhere to, and we're right now pretty low on where we are according to our policies. So I would like to see cuts from other places. I know that's not necessarily easy, but I think that's tough. And then the question I have is, was it just discussion? I thought the county commissioner said that they were going to give us $1 million over, or was it $2 million over what they're required to give?
So the current budget from the county commissioners is $1.1 million more than what's required under maintenance of effort. We still likely will come back and have to make adjustments to this budget in June after the commissioners formally approve their budget, because at that amount, you still your budget would be upside down because you don't have that revenue. But it would be premature to make those adjustments now prior to their hearing and them actually approving their budget with that amount. There's still a window of opportunity.
So we're essentially hoping that they change their mind and they give us $8 million more than what they originally proposed, and then if they don't, then we come back. And I feel like we have this discussion every year. I just really feel like we're doing this backwards. How could we go and it just feels like you guys are doing a lot of extra work when you come back and say this is what we're budgeting for, and then you have to go back to the drawing board again and figure out what's happening.
There are reasons related to collective bargaining that it would be premature to reduce your ask of the county commissioners before they actually vote on their final allocation. Because at that point, potentially, if you reduce the ask of the commissioners, then before they've made a decision, you've reduced what your goal is, and potentially with what you've been bargaining for within collective bargaining. I think maybe if I could come back to your first comment, So you would want to leave interest income where it is, that any overage throughout the year would fall to the fund balance as opposed to increasing the revenue on that line item. Is that, I just want to make sure I understand what your comment was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't have a policy that says we have to put so much into the fund balance each year. The county has a policy that says so much percentage goes in, I thought. To me, the fund balance was always raised when we had extra money to put into it. Am I right or wrong?
We have policy on fund balance that
Right, we do,
lists
but-
goal levels.
But do we have a percentage, though?
It lists a percentage. Let me pull it up for sure.
It says we should have a certain amount of days, and then it gives a percentage.
Right, it's number
for
of
what that
days,
would
which is
be.
roughly a percentage. Have it here in 1 second. Yep, I knew which one it was. So it reads, the reserve, this is policy DFAA. The reserve and fund balance policy of the Washington County government requires the county to hold a fund balance of 17%, approximately 60 days, of its annual general fund budget revenue. By doing this, the county holds a reserve to cover the local portion of the school system's revenue. The Board of Education's goal will be to maintain an unassigned fund balance in its general fund revenue, in its general fund that approximates between 45 and 60 days of the revenue it receives from all sources except the county government. So again, its goal, it's 45 to 60 days, which, you know, would be up to 17% of your non-locally funded county revenues. I think we usually estimate that it's 35 to 40 million. It changes, of course, annually as the budget changes.
50 to 60 million.
50 to 60 million would probably would be the
If you were on the
goal.
lower end.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Prue, if we don't put this money into the fund balance, what will our fund balance be? Sorry.
All right, I got it handy. Unrestricted fund balance at the end of last fiscal year is $15,920,000.
And that figure, how does that compare to other years?
Looking at the history, and the history I have dates back to 1994, it is the highest value we've had in the last 30 years.
And we've done well every year to keep that level.
We've ebbed and flowed. There's been times when the board has chosen to use the fund balance for various purposes. But over the last several years, because we were able to utilize some of our COVID recovery grants in places where we're able to save on what we would have paid for out of the operating budget, that amount has gone up considerably.
I'm fine with your recommendations as they stand. I think it was they're good recommendations, and I thank you for your hard work, and because I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Is it reasonable to say that the fund balance is as high as it's ever been as far as dollars? Yes, but when it's based on the percentages, our budgets are significantly higher than they were 30 years ago. So how would that compare percentage-wise?
I'd have to do an analysis on that. As I look at it, prior to the last couple of years, the highest value would have been in 2012, where it was approximately $12.5 million, and that was just prior to the purchase and renovation of this building. So we'd have to do some. We could go back. I could apply this data to the budget, the general fund budget, or the non-local funded portion of our general fund budget, and run a scenario on that, but I don't have that handy today.
So, Mr. Prue, I don't have a copy of that policy in front of me, but if you go up a few paragraphs, I think there's language that says something to the effect that it's the goal of the board to expend funds for the benefit of students within the year that funds are allocated, or something to that effect. You seeing something like that? My point being that the way money drops into the fund balance is that we have funds left at the end of a year that have gone unspent for whatever reasons, correct?
Correct. You're actually, so Article 2 of the policy, the opening paragraph, and this one is titled Use of Fund Balance. It states, if at all possible, funds should be spent or encumbered in the year for which they were appropriated. However, from time to time, there may be unspent funds available at year end. If this occurs, the unspent funds will be placed into the fund balance.
Okay. So there's no language that says we should be building a fund balance, but that the funds that we have allocated to us in a year should be spent on students, correct?
I think my interpretation would be that's what that opening paragraph of Section 2 says.
Okay.
But there is still, you have two parts. You have the part that says the funds allocated to it should be spent within the year. The other side is the board has, through the policy, has established a goal that they're striving towards.
Which we're not currently
So,
doing.
so what it is then comes down to, do we feed the fund balance or do we meet the needs of students? For me, that's the easy solution. We meet the needs of students. That's it.
I mean, if we're not going to follow the policy, I don't know why we have it. I mean, I just feel like we have consistently tapped into this fund balance recently, and we've spent quite a bit of money that hasn't been in our budget over the course of the year, and maybe dollar-wise the balance is high, but percentage-wise it's not. And we have a policy, and maybe over the course of the next couple of years, it's not going to have an impact, if we lower it, but years down the road, if we continually let that balance go further away from what the goal is, that will leave less money for kids in the future as well when we have unexpected needs, when you factor in inflation. There's a reason why we have this goal, and there's a reason why, it's in place. And again, I completely understand and I agree that we need to meet the needs of the kids as they come up, but at some point we have to acknowledge this goal, this policy. I understand it says it's a goal, and that's fine, because obviously there's always things that happen. It is our emergency fund, but it's a policy, and we're not doing anything to get closer to that goal, and that's a concern of mine.
Mr. Evans, you referenced that we have dipped into the fund balance. Can you refresh my mind, refresh me on what expenditures we've made from the fund balance this year too?
I mean, I don't know. I can't think of any specifically off the top of my head for this year, but in the past, I mean, we built a new put the new lights up for Smithsburg. We added new positions that from the school security assistants. A lot of those things weren't in the budget, so the money had to come from somewhere. So a lot of that stuff, I would imagine, would come from, maybe turnover credit that we have, but a lot of that stuff, I'm sure also we had to dip into that fund balance. And so every time we spend money that isn't in this budget from July 1 to June 30 next year, every time we spend money that's not in this budget, I would say it's safe to assume that, one, they're looking at other savings where maybe the need wasn't there that we originally thought, and then we're going to go and dip into that fund balance. And I think it's reasonable to assume that there's quite a bit of that money that we have spent has come from that fund balance over the course of the past couple of years.
We do not historically take money from the fund balance. If we did, that would have to be an action of the board to do that, even to put it in the general fund. The biggest fund balance thing in the last couple of years was some of the Tech High renovations that the board approved 2 or 3 years ago. They were in FY22.
Right. I think some of the expenses that you're referring to were reallocation, as you noted. They were reallocations of a planned change in expense throughout the budget year. So the security assistants were achieved either through that process or for turnover credit that was allocated to create that program. The lights at the Smithsburg Stadium were funded from the building renovation fund out of the maintenance general fund. But to Mr. Sisler's point, staff can't take money out of the general fund without specifically coming to the board and asking for that action.
So how has it ebbed and flowed then? Is it ebbing and flowing as far as how much money we're dropping to it, or ebbing and flowing as what the balance is?
Ebbing and flowing is how much money has dropped to it on a year-to-year basis. So, for instance, as I look at the value, and I'll go back to end of fiscal year 2019, 586,000 went to the fund balance. 2020, 1.2 million. 2021, 8 million. Strategically chosen to use in that particular year, where we used we used COVID relief grant funds to save operating funds to drop a larger fund balance for the purposes of funding the improvements at the technical high school. 2022 was 5.5 million and 2023 was 4.6 million. So we've increased the value over the last several years significantly. In most years prior, the numbers were not quite as high. But to your point, budgets also were not as high either.
Any other questions? So questions regarding whether or not we want to accept this recommendation as presented? We have consensus to move ahead with our meeting later this afternoon with this in mind? Yes? No further questions? Dr. Savine, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so very much. Colleagues, thank you. So we have nothing.
You're right on schedule.
We are adjourned.